Welcome back to the Poor Sports Podcast.
It was interesting to see the remote version because now we don't have the camera switching issue.
Yeah.
I'm going to pause that in it was an interesting spot for me to see it, I will say.
Thanks for joining us today. We're really delving into the past of Broccoli Guy today. If you are a Pacific Northwest sports fan, you're probably going to want to hear this because
Sure.
you know who Broccoli Guy is.
And it turns out I know who Broccoli Guy is better than any of you do.
You might know who Broccoli Guy is more than anybody in the world, as it turns out. So I was not expecting us to get that deep into the past of Broccoli Guy, but that's a very interesting topic for the local people. And if you're not local, your curiosity should be piqued at this moment. Like, who is Broccoli Guy? And we're going to tell you. We're going to tell you all about him, as much as anyone could possibly know.
He's probably somebody when you see him that you've seen on like Sports Center or something like that.
Probably. He's probably got some national TV time at some point.
Well, I know he is in his previous alter ego, but as which we talk about also.
Just the fact that there's an alter ego to this man that people don't even know about. We're going to peel back the curtain.
Yeah.
And you're going to find out. It's not bad. Broccoli Guy, if you're listening, which you probably will because you find things about yourself pretty well. It's not bad. It's just who you are, man. So enjoy that part. There's some national topics. Stephen A. Smith, you profess your love to Stephen A. Smith. It gets a little weird, but you know.
I did. I was singing like a Teddy Pendergrass song to him.
It's a good conversation, though. I think it touches on a lot more than just Stephen A. Smith. And then, of course, we have to talk about John Morant today.
Again,
I mean, he just keeps finding a way to make himself the story, and he's not very bright, as it turns out. So we got a lot.
It's getting harder to defend him.
It's getting harder to defend him for sure.
Yeah.
A lot to talk about. Of course, we finish up with the home run game, and I think if you've been following the home run game up to this point, this might be our best day ever.
This is a slobber knocker for sure.
It's a heavyweight bout in the home run game today, so stick around for that. You probably have some shows coming up.
Yes, tomorrow today probably if you're listening to this when it comes out, I'll be in Pasco, Washington, Eatonville, Washington on Friday. Duval, Washington on not like Duval County in Florida, but Duval, Washington on Saturday with my buddy Gabriel Rutledge, who's Seattle's Dave Attell, I call him, the best comic in the Northwest. And then Friday, May 26th, Bickerson's Brew House in Renton, Washington. I'm headlining a show, bringing a couple buddies out with me. June 25th, that's the last show I will headline before we have our kid. Very likely, unless I somehow get conned into doing another one. And I will be at the new Tacoma Comedy Club location on 6th and Proctor. Small room. We might be able to give away some tickets to that on this podcast. We'll see. I actually got to get confirmation from them. But I think we might be able to give away 2 tickets, which would be, we'll make you dance for them a little bit with broccoli in your hands. But how about you, Alex? What do you have coming? And by the way, we're trying to get involved with Bickerson's a little bit for some other stuff.
Yeah, they've been really very supportive of what we've been doing. So check them out. Check out Bickerson's Brew House if you haven't already. There's location in Renton. There's a location in Ballard.
They're also, by the way, they do comedy at the Ballard location. It might be happening this weekend. It's Monica Nevi, friend of the podcast, headlining. So
I think it is happening this Friday, in fact. So if you are listening the day this comes out, you still have time to get out there and check it out.
Unless you live in Eatonville, then come see me. That's the options.
Yeah. Otherwise, I am going to your shows.
Yeah.
That's what I have coming up. But yeah,
you have air conditioning.
I have air conditioning. Why would I ever leave home? I have no reason to. That's the only reason people leave home in the Seattle area is because they got to go someplace that has AC. Well, now I've got it. I have no reason to leave anymore. You can find me everywhere at AlexSSN.
And yeah, I'm at the Casey McLean. Thank you guys for listening.
All right, we did.
All right, here we are. I actually we should have had like some brief conversation before this, but instead I was like, let's just go. And your
It's better this way. It's
yeah,
better this way.
you're holding you have like a USB mic of some type,
I
and
do.
you're holding it
It
like an
could sit on
Elvis
the.
crooner mic.
Yeah, I'm gonna do some songs after this. No, no, I had it sitting on the table, and I was like, my my office chair and my desk here are like they're just the wrong height for this mic,
Sure.
right? So if I have it sitting on the table, I'll be leaning forward the whole time, and I was like, what's gonna feel worse, leaning forward for an hour or just holding my mic and leaning back? And I was like, I'll just hold the mic.
Dude, I have that old man situation going on right now where I've driven like so much in the last couple weeks,
Yeah,
and now when I drive for more than a couple hours, my tailbone is just wrecked, dude. And I
you
have
gotta be you gotta be one of those people that gets like the little gel seat cushion from Costco and just
dude,
throws that down.
I'm going to do that. I didn't know that existed, but I will
It
do that.
exists. Yeah, they
I
have lots of options for you.
I bruised my tailbone many years ago. So I used to work at this box factory, and we were like busy season, understaffed, so I was working like 7 12s a week, basically. Like I hadn't had
Wow.
a day off in like 40 days, and I was working long shifts every day. I
Yeah.
mean, making a shitload of money for my age at the time, but my now wife, then girlfriend, came to my apartment, and we were going to go visit my mom in Spokane the next day. And I went out drinking with some buddies, and because I'd been working so much, my alcohol tolerance was like way down.
Yeah.
And everybody that came bought a pitcher of Mac and Jacks. I don't know, it was like the theme of the day, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I
Mac and
had
Jacks
it,
is one of those beers. It's very similar to Manny's, and it's like the universally okay beer. Like
yeah,
everybody can deal with like a light beer of any sort. That one's just like an elevated crowd pleaser.
yes, exactly. I was gonna use the phrase crowd pleaser.
Yeah.
And so I had purchased a pitcher myself. I also had at least one beer off of every pitcher because this was like a holy shit, Casey gets to come out for a day
Yeah.
thing. So
Yeah.
like 7 or 8 people show up, everybody buys pitchers. I was like 12 or 13 beers in for the night.
Yeah.
We were at Meeker Street Bar and Grill in Kent, and I was playing pool with someone, and I was like crushing them despite being hammered. And they started to get frustrated, and they go, "Okay, fine, just let me buy you a drink." And I go, "Dude, there's no way they're gonna let me drink any more alcohol. Can you? There's no way." And they were like, "Actually, sir, we think you probably should leave. You're not driving, right?"
Wow.
I know. So then I go home, walk home. I lived very close to there at the time. And my wife, I lived in this, like, I called it a flop house. It was like 2 dudes plus me, 3 roommates. I actually lived with I think we've mentioned him on the podcast or off the podcast, Sean Kramer at
Yeah.
the time. And then this other guy who was like just a hopeless alcoholic, like worse than you when we started this podcast, when you had to quit drinking at the start
Oh
of the
yes.
podcast.
Yeah. That's me.
uh, the Anyways, so I had the big bedroom. I paid a
Okay.
little more rent, got the big bedroom, and I'm
Yeah.
in the bathroom and I have the bathroom in this bedroom, and my wife, then girlfriend, is laying on the bed. Normally, she lays on the what side would it be? If you're at the foot facing the head, she would be on the left side of the bed.
Okay.
I come out of I'm drunk, enthusiastic that she's there, enthusiastic to have the next day off. I come out of the bathroom running to go jump on the bed. She's on the right side of the bed. She's on the incorrect side of the bed.
God. So you
And
just threw your whole weight on top of her.
no, I did the most athletic thing I've ever done in my life. Midair adjusted, missed the bed completely, it landed directly on my tailbone and bruised it so fucking bad. It's like I went there and they were like, it's
Wow.
not broken, but it's like as bruised as it could be without being broken.
Yeah. Well, I will say if that's the worst thing that's ever happened to your ass, that's not so bad.
But yeah, so I still have weirdly like a lot of sensitivity at times. One of them apparently is when you spend like 80 hours in a couple weeks sitting in either plane seats or car seats.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I
Um,
get it, man. That's just the perks of getting old. All of a sudden, just driving in a car for a while. I'm the type of person that when I drive, I lean to the right on the console, like in the middle. I
Interesting.
just lean and I'm like a left-hand driver, just. And so if I go a long distance that way, I'll get out of the car and everything feels out of alignment, right? Like,
Yeah.
there were times where if I drove a long distance and then got out, like my left side of my hip would hurt from leaning for that long. And there was a time where I had to consciously like pull myself back and be like, dude, you can't be leaning like that. You're just gonna like wreck yourself. And that's just it's driving apparently is a young man's game.
Can you imagine if our generation had to ride horses everywhere, how quickly we'd all develop we would invent some syndrome that was like horseback syndrome, and we'd all have braces and like doctor's notes to not have to go to work.
Yeah. Oh, why not? I mean, take advantage of what you can do. Have you ever ridden a horse? Have you ridden a horse yourself?
If I have, it was like one of those very controlled situations where they were just like tied to a pole and going in circles.
Pony rides at the fair or whatever.
Exactly,
yeah.
that kind of thing.
When I was a kid, I rode a horse a few times here and there, and I don't remember it that well, but I remember it being very uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
It's not. We're just not designed for that.
It looks miserable. It doesn't look fun. There's nothing. I mean, I will say horses are kind of designed with a natural saddle, right? Like their musculature and bone structure are like inviting for a human groin and ass.
You see that and you think, I gotta put my body on that.
I guess there is that, like, people get bow-legged from riding horses, so maybe there is a syndrome, and we would just, as millennials, we would just be milking that. It'd be like, oh, this is why I can't go to work today. It's because I'm bow-legged.
I mean, they really invented camels for this purpose, right? They have the two humps. They've got just the natural valley where you're supposed to be.
Do you think if you're thirsty, you can just, like, stick a straw in a camel like an EpiPen and just drink right out of the hump?
Don't they say if, like, you're caught in the desert, and I think that's the thing that they tell you to do, basically, is, like, if you're in the desert, kill the camel and then crawl into its insides, and it'll, like, keep you from getting scorched. Yeah.
That's the revenant of it's the camel's revenant.
Yeah, it's very dark. If you ever find yourself in that situation, you probably have more things to worry about than just that.
The series of bad choices that would lead to me alone on a camel in the desert. I think I deserve to die.
Yeah, it's over.
I will never do that on purpose.
Yeah, no, it sounds terrible. So you've been on the road then. You've been driving places. You're back in the comedy game full time.
Yeah, well, and the only reason I missed out very much was because of the laryngitis thing. This last weekend was scheduled to be my last road weekend before we have the new kid. So I'm not like never traveling away from Tacoma, but I'm not spending the night anywhere basically.
Yeah.
Tomorrow I'm actually going to Pasco, but I'm coming back at night.
Wow, you're doing a 1 day to Pasco.
Yeah, well, and I'll tell you, I'm even going out golfing early,
wow.
So it's going to be a long day.
Complete
But
day.
I kind of have this thing, like, I even left Saturday after I were open for Harlan Williams. Host was this really funny local comic who you might not have seen, but his name's Adam Tiller, which I have some stories about he and I also. But I left after my set on the Late Show to come home for Mother's Day.
Okay.
So like left there at like 11:30 probably.
Yeah.
And drove straight through. I'm a pretty big like let's it's very selfish to do comedy, so I try to do everything I can to not make it negatively impact my wife.
Yeah. I mean, you treat comedy like most people treat like a rec league sport. You know, I get my 1 day to go out and do my sport, and then I'm not even going to go to the bar with the guys. I'm coming right back home. But you do that with like these hours long trip across the state.
Sure. Yeah. I try to treat them like I'm a startup business and I'm going on a sales trip, you know?
Okay. Yeah.
Like if I could afford, I've thought about this recently because like I'm starting to make enough money in comedy where like it's not that unrealistic. I need something to happen, right? Like I need a social media clip to pop off or something like that. I'm never going to go through the same iterations of popularity that like the comics that I'm friends with that are like national touring headliners went through. I just don't have the bandwidth to do that with a family, right?
Yeah.
Or in my marriage, you know what I mean? Like my wife is not on board with that. I don't want to be away from my kid that much, man. It is tough. And especially now that we're going to have two, it's so fucking difficult to be away. My daughter on one of the days we have one of those cameras in her room and I can see it anytime. It's connected to Wi-Fi, so I can see it anywhere. And my wife was like, watch her. She was like singing a song, right? And then I clicked it on and I just like hadn't had a chance to tell her goodnight that night. So I was like, I'm not going to use her name, but like, I love you, good night. And then she's like, "Are you home?" And I'm like, "I'm not home. I won't be home for a couple
This
days."
is the voice of God.
Dude, she started losing her mind, screaming and crying, sad. And I'm in like a Spokane Comedy Club green room. Like, I fucking should have never talked to her. Like, I fucked up. I'm so sad now.
Way to
I was
go.
so happy leading up to this. And now I'm so sad because my daughter's like screaming, crying that I'm not
Yeah.
home that night, you know?
Yeah, that's rough, man. Comedy is not it's not a married man's game, married man or woman. Like
Sure.
it's lonely, you're out on the road. This is probably why dad jokes exist. You have so many
Yeah.
funny dads out there that have no forum for their humor because they cannot leave their family, so they just tell jokes to their family
Yes.
poorly.
So I went out with I had a moment where I was like, I think I'm too old for some parts of this
Yeah.
weekend. I went out with this dude, Adam Tiller. We didn't go together, but we were like there together. I know him from he lives in Everett. And he's one of these guys, man, that's like he's gonna be big because he has nothing. I'm not, and I mean this in like this is gonna sound a little bit insulting, but he's got nothing holding him back. He has no kids. He has no
Yeah.
like. I don't.
He's
think
got
he
no
has,
baggage. No baggage.
He's got no baggage. He's like literally could like leave town. You know, I think he's got a lease, but other than that, I think he could fit all of his possessions into his car outside of like his bed or whatever, and just fucking leave town. And he will eventually. He will eventually, I'm sure, go to New York or LA or something like that.
Yeah.
But he's very funny. He sets up so that he can make hosting work. He knows a guy that's got access to like a free cabin in Medical Lake, Washington.
Okay.
And he's like, "Do you want to do this?" And my first instinct, I go, "Nope, I got a hotel. I'm all right." And then I was like, "Well, I could save some money, and it would be fun. Like, I love hanging out with comics. It would be fun to like, you know." I rarely get to do. I think you might know this about me. I went to community college when I was 21. Like, started college late. I never got like the carefree college experience. I never lived in a dorm.
Yeah.
The closest I had to the college experience actually was living in that flop house in Kent. And
That's more of a college experience than a lot of people get. So,
dude, there's some stories there that we could spend a whole podcast episode on. But I like, you know, the camaraderie and all that. I love that. I really love that. And I, you know, since playing baseball in high school, probably I haven't really experienced it. So whenever I can get it, I was like, yeah, sure, let's do this cabin. It's got separate sleeping quarters, whatever. I show up to it, and it's like you go through these, like you're oscillating in your mind between, is this a great thing or am I going to get murdered in these woods? And so you like get off and you're like, it's like a gated community, and you're like, oh, this is going to be nice. And then you're like,
cabin is this?
and then you're like, you're driving in and you're like, oh, this is like a RV park, not really like, and then you're like, oh, it's like
Technically still a gated community though. And that's the important part.
and then it's like, oh, that like the nicest places in this community are like mobile homes. And you're like, oh, this like that dude has a fucking thin blue line tattoo on his body.
Oh,
Like,
yeah,
I don't know if
yeah,
we're gonna
yeah.
get along incredibly well here. And then you get into the place and you're like, it's a cabin. It's not fully rustic because it's like a mobile home, but it's not luxurious by any means.
Yeah.
And it's got like that kind of cabiny smell. And you're like, oh man, I kind of like they put you up in a nice hotel. And I get there and I'm like, I test these beds, man. I'm like, I showed up out before Adam did, and I tested. There's a room with 2 twin beds and a room with like a queen bed in it. And I was like,
Yeah.
the only bed that is even close to acceptable for my back is the queen bed. So I set all my shit up in there. And then we have some confusion
Yeah.
about whether or not the people that own the cabin are actually staying at the cabin and if we're going to have to share the
no.
cabin.
Oh,
so I take
no.
all my shit out of this room. And then later in the night, we go do the comedy show, come back. And another funny thing happened is I showed up at about 4, and the guy that owns the cabin thought we were going to show up a day later.
Oh God.
And so he had not turned on the water for the cabin. And so I get off the road. I've been doing keto.
Yeah.
I take a disgusting shit in this toilet.
Oh no.
And it is a cabin that's got no fan in the bathroom. There's whatever's in the tank is the water you have available to flush.
God, you are the worst guest. The worst
Dude,
guest.
so bad. I even like so anyways, I'm texting the guy to figure out how to turn on the water. He's like, I'll come do it. Don't worry. Sorry, I didn't know you were coming today. I'm like, they have water available outside. There's like a spigot on a thing. I'm filling this water bottle from my car, just trying to do anything to get this shit to go down the toilet. It's just the whole cabin now smells like shit, and there's nothing I can do about it, you know? So anyway, we go through, we have the show, it's fun, whatever. Come back, and I'm like, we're bullshitting, getting to know each other. I don't know him very well. We know each other a little bit, but not very well. There's so many comics that, like, I'm sure you have coworkers like this where, you have a rapport, you have things that you both care about and like.
Sure.
But you don't spend a lot of time with them, right? You don't know them that well. So we're doing all that, and then he goes, all right, man, I'm going to go to bed. And then he goes into the room with the queen bed. And I was like, oh, that's kind of like, fucked. I was like, that was like, we agreed that I would take my shit out in case those other people came. And he's like, yeah, and then I put my stuff in there. And so I just, as a joke, went and just laid on the bed while he was like brushing his teeth or something. I just went and laid on the bed like it's my bed.
Just in your underwear, just no other clothes on. Like we can tag team this if you want.
Well, so we will have talked about it on his podcast, but there was a part of him that was like, is this dude trying to fuck me? Like, I don't know him well enough. And I never even, like, I think you come from a similar place as me, like your experience in life, where it never even crossed my mind that he would think I was trying to fuck him. This is just like a baseball camp dorm prank to go lay on the bed,
Yeah, you have to have well, at this point in life, he's probably not prepared for what you were bringing to the table.
Sure.
How old is this guy? Is this guy
He's
younger?
like 34, yeah.
Okay, so you guys are roughly the same age then. But if he didn't have a sports, like I know what you're saying. Like you'd go on baseball road trips and guys would just be doing that, pranking each other all the time. And
dude, I remember I went to Central Washington University's baseball camp, and my best friend, the guy who was the best man at my wedding, my like childhood best friend, he like walked in on me. I'm like in the shower, showering, completely naked. And he just like walked in, fucking blew and hit me with a bucket of water. Like what violation that would be in the world today. Like the list of violations there is enormous.
I mean, I'm sure that stuff happens all the time still. We just don't hear about it as much. But I mean, that there's something to all of that, though. There's something to that level of camaraderie that that bonds people. Now, it can obviously go too far. You usually hear those stories in the news.
Yeah.
But that's pretty innocent stuff.
Thank you. I'm glad to hear you say that, because
he didn't think that, though.
He did not think that. So we're good now. I don't want to blow the whole thing up, because we had not only did we have a podcast where we talked about, like, he told me some other comics, and so this is it's called Fathom and Friends. I don't know when the episode's going to come out, probably a week or two.
Yeah.
He told me there's some other comics that view me as like a bully, as like an upperclassman bully. And it's funny because I view myself, I'm like, I try to really support younger comics, like newer comics. And all I care about is if people are taking comedy seriously or not. This whole hierarchy thing doesn't matter to me. I'm like, there's people who suck at comedy who I love hanging out with.
You're probably on the other side of the median at this point, age-wise.
For sure.
Especially with local comics. Because, if you're in your 20s or whatever, that seems like the ideal time to maybe, and just like you did, that's when you kind of started this pursuit of comedy. But it's built for people that age, because you don't have things weighing you down. You don't have a job. You can afford to be poor at that point in your life. When you're in your 30s, man, and this kind of goes back to the free lodging aspect of it. My friends and I, when we would go on trips when we were in our 20s, we would get 5, 6, 7, 8 people in a single hotel room.
Sure.
I remember we would every year for a number of years, we would go to the
my back hurts just thinking about that.
Yeah. Well, somehow I would manage to like finagle my way into like a premium sleeping spot every time. I don't know how. I'm very charming, clearly.
Yes.
But
I'm not, it turns out.
Yeah. You'd get, I mean, the most I ever remember was, I think it was 6 or 7 in a single room, which it was 2 queen beds. But at that point we had like 2 per bed and 2 people on the floor, like no rollaway, because there was no room for that. And then all your stuff in there on top of that. And that's just a lot. And when you get to your 30s, once you're at home sleeping on a nice bed every night, and you have a little bit of disposable income, probably the number one easiest thing for you to go pay for when you're away from home is a nice place to sleep. Like it's a priceless experience having a nice place to sleep on the road versus some free bed that someone kicked your way.
Yeah. Yeah, and like the only reason it seemed, I mean, a couple things is I feel guilty turning down money when we have this kid on the way.
Yeah.
So like the extra money is part of it. I'm also I feel a little bit like it's like it was like I was really looking forward to it as like a positive experience.
Yeah.
But there is a history of like, you know, down low gay men in the entertainment industry doing this kind of thing, right? Like that is a thing. Also,
Yeah.
like apparently this is something he has experienced is like gay men in the Seattle comedy scene coming on to him or whatever, gay men period. And so again, it's like it's just so funny because he played sports, but he played hockey. I don't know how like
How weird it gets
sexual
on
the
the hockey
pranks in
scene.
hockey are. Yeah. I would have assumed they're even more crazy, but yeah, to me it was like so obviously a bit. And he's like, oh, the other thing is he's sober. And he's like, yeah, and you were drinking. He kept bringing up that I was drinking. I'm like, dude, I
Oh
would have
yeah.
done this sober. Like this wasn't something I needed like liquid courage to do, was to go fuck
Everybody,
with
in
you.
my experience, you do get a little handsy when you've been drinking. No, I'm just kidding. I'm kidding.
That's probably true, by the way. Like
No, I don't know. I don't think you've ever touched me in a way that I didn't welcome.
and you are very welcoming when you've been drinking, so it works out pretty well. Uh, anyway, so yeah, the shows were fun. I did go visit I have an uncle that's in the ICU, which I probably shouldn't have even brought up. I regret bringing it up now because it's going to bring the mood down. But he's like a guy who has listened to this podcast and has been historically very supportive.
That's
So
cool.
the other thing is I go visit him in the ICU. I go talk to my cousin who's like, you know, got a lot of life shit to unload on me. I haven't seen him in a while. So we'd sit and gives me his whole, you know, all the tough stuff he's going through in life. And then go do this podcast with Adam, where it's like everyone thinks you're a bully, and I was like, I just like my whole life fucking sucks. Is that what's going on?
I mean, that's the reality of being a part-time comedian. You're bouncing back and forth between real life, family life,
Yes.
work life, and then comedy life, and that's tough to do. That's really
Luckily, I've taken the one of those out of the equation, the work life part out of the equation.
made things a little bit easier on
Yeah.
yourself. But also, you know, as a comedian, man, and I imagine this happens to you all the time. As soon as you tell people you do comedy, there's an expectation that you be funny. Like,
Sure.
I don't do comedy, so if I happen to be funny, that's just a pleasant surprise for the
Yeah,
world.
absolutely.
But if you're not funny, then you've let everyone down.
Yeah, I played golf with my buddy Charles Hall, who's I'm trying to think of. He's a Spokane comic. He's really funny. I was like playing with some old coworkers of his
Yeah.
at Wandermere Golf Course, and they know he does comedy. They don't know me at all, and they were like, so are you ever like, you know, do you ever do comedy and there's like no laughs? And I'm like, the first 4 years I did comedy, it was like mostly that. Like, yes, it's funny when people ask those questions because it's like, yes, I fucking used to bomb all the time, and now it doesn't happen as often, but it's still every now and then will happen. Oh, you're muted. This guy. Oh, still muted. Look at this guy. With the technical issues. My God. What did he do to his microphone? Oh, my God. It's all on me to talk. I could be vamping instead.
Can you hear me?
There you go. There you come. You came in.
Okay, I literally muted it for like half a second to get a drink of water, and then because I thought I was going to be fancy and be like, I'm going to use this mute button just to
It's like a cough
get some
button.
water, and then I unmuted it, and it just didn't want me to do that. It didn't want me talking. That's fine.
That's all right. This is the first time we've done a remote podcast, despite threatening to do it a couple times. One
Yeah,
time we just didn't do any podcast at all.
That was easy. Now I'm very comfortable in here. My air conditioned house feels great.
Yeah, that's because there's two things going on. We have a portable air conditioner blasting in the background,
Yeah.
which I'm sure will come through on the microphone, and I'm not going to apologize for it.
I don't hear anything on my end.
Oh, good. So
So
maybe it's all
yeah.
on your end. How quiet is yours compared to like a window air conditioner?
You would never know my AC's on.
God, what a fucking
Because it's
dream
central
world.
AC. It's like it'd be the same as if for most
Like the
people,
heat was on.
yeah, if your heat was on, it's like the exact same sound. I mean, that can vary in houses. Some
Sure.
houses have a very loud furnace and others don't. But now that I am part of the 25% of Washington homes that have air conditioning, which is, I assume that figure has probably gone up in recent
Sure.
years. But I have nothing to complain about. My life is finally complete. This is it. I've reached the top. All I can do is
It's
go
what you've
down
always
now.
dreamed of. Yeah.
It's everything. If you live in the Pacific Northwest, this is it. This is it.
What do you feel about those people who are like, uh, you only need AC like 3 days a year?
Yeah. Well, that used to be the case. I mean, I feel
Sure.
like until a few years ago, it's like, look, if there was ever an argument for climate change, which there really shouldn't even be an argument. I know it's a topic that gets politicized,
Sure.
but the reality is the climate is changing. There's
Yes.
nothing you can do about it. Now you can choose to accept it or deny it. That's
Sure.
about it. But the Seattle area is a really good example of how the climate has changed. When we were growing up around here, it very infrequently topped 80 degrees. And
Yeah.
if it did, it was only in July or August. And now here we are in May, and we've already hit 90, which is the timing was perfect.
Sure.
The timing
your
for
air
AC
conditioning.
was perfect. There was a couple days there where we really didn't go outside much, and every time I did, I was like, "Woo, it's hot out, man."
I was in, so a couple years ago when there was the big like 108 or 118 degree
Yeah,
day
yeah, those
here,
were miserable. Yeah,
I was in Phoenix for a couple of those days, which I
sure.
think was technically hotter, but like doesn't feel hotter than here at 118.
Yeah, yeah, it never
But I
does.
remember I was in a pretty small Airbnb with my buddy Josh Firestein, and it had, I mean, Phoenix has had that problem for a long time. So every home has air conditioning. They have
Yeah,
no grass and air conditioning at every home,
yeah,
basically. And the difference, I would open the front door, and it would feel like I was standing uncomfortably close to like a bonfire,
yeah,
because it was just like this, the difference between 72 climate controlled to like 120 just fucking beating on you was
yeah.
crazy.
No, it's you don't really notice it until you're in an air conditioned environment because you get used to tolerating it around here.
Sure.
When we have that stretch every year of like 90-degree days, man, you just get used to it. You sweat in your home, you sweat overnight, you wake up and you're sweating, and you're like, okay, this is just my life now.
Yeah.
And
We
I
we
understand it.
we bought a Medea, the Tyler Perry character, put out a
Yeah,
bunch of air
yeah,
conditioners. It's not spelled the same, but I think it is pronounced the same, like
it's
Medea or
also
Medea.
this is her
Anyway,
next
there's they make
evolution.
one that's like it's like a U shaped, so you can put your window down in the bottom of the U, and so your window's actually only open like a couple inches, which helps because one, it's less like potential for air to get through. It makes it more efficient.
Yeah,
Two, like for us, it's on the bottom floor, so it's only a couple inches that our windows open, and so if somebody were to try to break in, that's the thing that always blows my mind about window air conditioning units. Is like it's got to be so easy. You just you punch a fucking accordion
yeah,
piece. It's like punching a paper wall in a like Japanese hotel. Like you like I can break into this house, you know. Um,
yeah,
so, but it's like it's also super quiet. So it's in our bedroom, and it's like, yeah, I mean it's crazy. It's the one that I want to get for the future podcast studio if we don't end up in my garage at some point. That's the other thing too, is like with this weather, I'd love to go in the garage and do the podcast, like figure out a way to set a studio up in there, but it'd be 150 degrees in there right now, you know?
we have a tendency, if we're both in the same room together, it doesn't really matter where it is, we're going to get that thing up like 20 degrees hotter than it
Yes.
was previously. Is it hot
Yes.
in here, or is it just us?
Are we putting off humidity? Not just heat, but are we putting off humidity
And
somehow?
I run so warm as it is that it's just like, yeah. I mean, I was talking with one of my buddies who watches the podcast, and he was saying
Hell
that
yeah.
like,
One of the few viewers.
but he says he watches because he likes to see how sweaty I am. That's the reason he watches. And I was like, well, that sucks because I
That's
do
funny.
feel hot all the time as it
Yeah.
is.
You're a recent dog owner. I had like dogs in my life, but hadn't owned a dog until I think 4 years ago.
Yeah.
And they run like 103 is like the healthy temperature for a dog. But at first you're like, holy shit, this dog is like has a fever all the time, you know? And I kind of feel like that's the way
Yeah.
my body is, where it's like I'm just always warming up the space that I'm in, whether it's under the covers or whatever.
Oh, absolutely. One of our dogs is rescued from Houston, Texas. That's where they found this dog. And then a lot of times, especially around here, you'll get like imported dogs from Texas because in Texas they kill a lot of dogs. So there's a lot of
Right.
rescue shelters up here that bring in dogs from those states where they have kill shelters instead of adoption. And our Houston dog, loves the heat, man. Those days that
Oh
you were
yeah.
talking about where it was like 115 around here, 110, 115, our dog still went outside and just laid in the sun. Like this dog she likes to go under the covers. Like if we let her up on the bed, she'll go underneath and she'll stay there. You know, like if you've ever, as a person, if you ever go like fully underneath the covers and like build the tent around you, you can handle that for like a couple minutes and then you're
Yeah.
like, I gotta escape. Our
Yeah.
dog will sit under there for hours given the opportunity.
So my dog's from San Antonio, and she's presently miserable sitting close to the air conditioner. Like I,
Yeah, I mean, it's the dogs are, they're like people, man. They vary wildly in what they can
yeah,
handle as far as temperature.
yep. So what have you been up to the last week? I had my oh, I did get a hotel for the second night, by the way.
You were out at that point.
Yeah,
Your bed bit had fallen short. Things had gotten awkward and very
yeah.
uncomfortable, I
He did
assume, at
tell
that
me
point.
that well, the funny thing is the thing that really was kind of fortunate but also like potentially unfortunate was we still had to work together the rest of the weekend. It wasn't like, and I'm like, in my mind, I'm like, this dude thinks I'm like a fucking sexual predator, and
Yeah,
now he has to work
yeah.
with me. So we got along fine. We figured it out, and it was cool. But I was where I golfed with my buddy Charles was way north of it was north of Spokane. It was like, I don't know, 25 miles north of downtown, or minutes north of downtown Spokane, and where we were at was already like 30 minutes away from. So it was like it would have been very difficult to get out there and
Yeah.
play. So that was part of the reason, but the other reason was like I slept fucking amazing.
It does make a huge difference, man. When you've
Yeah.
been sleeping in one bad spot and go to a nice, yeah, it's nice. What have I been doing? I went to the Seattle Thunderbirds hockey game.
Yes.
Our local NHL team decided they didn't want to win anymore, so
Yeah,
they
they
are
were
now
done with playing hockey for
they're out of the
years.
playoffs, and that is very sad. They had a great run, but our junior hockey team is still winning games, and junior hockey is not that exciting. We don't have to get into all of that. It's
Sure.
a bunch of teen.
It
It's
used to
like
be all we
six.
had though. It's very
It
fun to go
is.
watch the
Yeah, it is.
games.
It's a lot of fun to be at. It's probably not a topic everyone cares a whole lot about, and I
Sure.
understand that. But the bigger issue is a lot of fun. They're actually in the championship right now. So if you do care about these things, now is the time to tune in to WHL hockey and the Seattle Thunderbirds because they're going for a championship, which is great. But we generally like to go on Tuesdays because they do this thing called Two for Tuesday, and they even do it during the playoffs, which is nice.
Wow.
Half price tickets, half price beer, and then like $2 snacks. So you can get like popcorn, hot dogs, sodas for $2. It's a hell of a deal.
Wow.
Yeah, it makes the major pro sports look silly. But while we were there, one of our local celebrities happened to be in attendance with us, and you might know this guy. And we're gonna have to explain this guy to people who
Oh, interesting.
might be
I'm excited to
listening
find out who it is.
outside of the Pacific Northwest because this guy requires some explanation. But do you know the broccoli guy?
I do know the broccoli guy. I'm gonna send you a text about this, but yes, I do know the broccoli guy.
The broccoli guy, for those who do not know the broccoli guy, he's Seattle based. I believe he's a substitute teacher is his actual profession. I only know
Sure.
this because I've heard him explain it on a Mariners fan video before. So he's a substitute teacher. Uh, Apparently a stand-up comic in his past.
Yes, he was. He was.
According to you.
Yep.
But I would pay money. I would actually, if he was headlining your next show, I would go see it. I would definitely go see it. I'll probably be at your next show anyway, but I would definitely go see that one.
Well, you won't be at my next show because it's tomorrow in Pasco. So
Okay. Well, okay. So I won't be at your next show, but I'll be at the next week sometime. You
you'll
have
be.
a lot of shows.
Oh yeah, that's
You're a
right.
busy man.
We got shows. I got shows
We got shows.
in
We can
different
promote.
area codes.
You're all over the place these
That's
days.
a great dad joke from the '90s, by the way. If you were a dad comic in the '90s, I bet you were really fucking
You love
popping
that
that
one.
out.
I still use the area codes every now and then. Anytime it rhymes with hose, it works. So the broccoli guy, he's just this dude that shows up to games, usually wearing outlandish outfits. Sometimes it's like I don't know if you've ever seen like the male romper, but it looks like the male romper. I don't know if it
Yeah,
is,
it's
but
in a
it's like
Dixie cup.
yeah, it looks like a '90s Dixie cup. If you ever remember the Instagram account "Fuck Jerry," it was like one of the very first meme accounts. They had that logo. the logo of like the 90s Dixie Cup, and that's like the outfit that he wears a lot of times. He wasn't wearing it yesterday, but he'll show up at games by himself. This man does not appear to have friends, and that's fine. Not everybody has friends, but I can't imagine there'd be a ton of people that would want to go to the game with him, because whether you like his shtick or not, he's going to games and just a stalk of broccoli in each hand and dancing with it, and it's just kind of weird. Like, it's a lot. He's a very divisive topic, because
Yes.
If I've heard him talked about on sports radio before, he gets talked about on social media a lot, and you wouldn't think this if you didn't know anything about him, but there are just as many people that support this guy from afar.
Yes.
I don't think they're like actually his friends or family members. They support him from afar. There's just as many people that support him from afar as there are haters. And I think most of the haters they're like apathetic at this point. They're like, if this guy, my opinion is like, if this is the only thing that is stopping him from going out and hurting himself or others, then let him go ahead. But that's how I look at it. Like, it's such a goofy thing to do, that like it has to be one of those things where it's like, okay, he might not be 100% all right, and he needs this to get by every day. If this is what he needs, then just leave him be. Let him do his thing, let him dance. But then you have the other people that are like, this is amazing.
So
they love it.
Am I correct that the thing that he took part in, the Mariners thing, is also what one Alex Akita took part in?
Yeah, I got a lot of shit for that, getting lumped in with him. And I will say, for all the people that support this guy, again, I'm not against, I'm not pro or con broccoli guy necessarily. I feel like I straddle the fence most of the time. I'm not going to say a bad word about him, other than that this is a little weird and it's a lot. But
so
as soon as he got roped into that video after I'd done one, I was like, "Are you kidding me?"
So he is a comic. He hasn't done comedy in a long time. I'm very excited to talk to you about him off the podcast.
That's how you know it's good.
Yeah, but I will
you have
say,
to give the people here something, just a little bit.
Well,
about this
what
man.
I'll say is, so his name's Jim Stewart Allen, and I think he has scrubbed most of his stand-up off the internet, but he was a finalist for, here's what I'll tell you. He was a finalist, a fan vote finalist for Drunk History.
Interesting.
And oh man, hold on. If I can find that, we could watch that. But if not, let's see. I don't think we're gonna find it. But I do have something for us to watch while we're talking about this. Hold on.
He was. That seems like a pretty big deal, being a fan vote finalist for Drunk History.
Sure. Yeah. It was. Oh wow. Did they?
No, we don't need to watch this.
I think we gotta watch it. Am I sharing?
I can see it. I can't hear it, which is better. That's good. It's good that way.
Oh man. So tell me about this. What's embarrassing to you about this? Because there was a thing like this in comedy. It was what's that? Sam Adams Beer did a thing with comedians talking about each other in like a sincere way, and every comedian that did it got a lot of shit for it. Yeah. But I don't think you have, because comedians are supposed to be funny, right? But you like this, you are a lifelong Mariners fan and you're a bit of a skeptic. But what makes you cringe so much seeing this, apart from it just being something that you're involved with?
Yeah, that's pretty much it.
Okay. Well, then in that case,
there's nothing that bad about it. It's actually like, it's probably endearing to some people.
Tino.
Here's the thing. I'm buddies with Kevin Martinez, who was kind of in charge of this project as like the man behind marketing at the Mariners. And he had asked me if I would come in and share stories. And I was like, to be honest, I was a little hesitant at first, because they do a good job with stories. They do a good job with any kind of story.
Do you like this side profile?
No, it's terrible.
It's
terrible, because I have a really thick neck.
You do have a thicker neck than you have, like a little bit of a linebacker's neck.
It just blends right into the rest of my head, so it looks terrible. But on top of everything else, it was just one of those things where I was like, man, I do have some good stories about the Mariners, but I don't even know like what I'm going to talk about. And they just got me talking for like an hour and a half, 2 hours. And they do a good job of like extracting usable stuff out of that. So that's kind of what they did. But yeah, I mean, then man, the other fan videos that they did when they include Broccoli Guy later on. Again, it's not nothing against Broccoli Guy, but
Sure.
now I know how people think of him, and I'm now part of that group. And that
Yeah. So I'll
I
let you.
didn't
Oh,
I didn't ask
you're a
for
Boca
this.
Chica reference. Um, I'll
Yeah, Boca Chica.
we can I'll spare you the rest of it just for your own sanity. So what I know about the Broccoli Guy is he was a huge John Ryan fan. He was like a big fan of punters. I don't remember him being that big because I knew him like pretty well. He lived in Tacoma.
Yeah,
Um,
you
he
might know
was
him better than anybody who's ever weighed in on him at this point.
Oh yeah, well I think there's a thing like there's like a sensitivity among comedians. One thing I'll say about him is like people fucking they do let him know when they're talking about him on sports radio. Like he hears it, and
Oh,
I'm
he's got rabbit ears, man. You can, I it's in some ways it's kind of heartbreaking to watch him at a game because when
sure
he's not doing his dancing, again, he's not there with other people, but and we all do this to some degree, but he'll just be checking his phone. But one thing I
right.
think he's doing is he's checking his phone for mentions about himself often because he will,
Yeah,
if
that's
you ever
interesting.
tweet the words broccoli guy, which I've done before, he will find your tweet and either like it, comment, or retweet. So he's just constantly looking for whatever that affirmation is that he needs.
Yeah,
And
yeah. That's I mean that's like truly that's how you know he's a former comic is because
yeah,
that's like all comedy is.
that is the way of the comic for sure.
Yeah, I
For
mean, I guess
sure.
I don't have like strong feelings either way about it. I think that like you and I have talked a little bit about how there's like kind of a weird thing about being a super fan. I think we
Yeah.
edited out of the last episode because I said it like kind of off mic. But there is a weird thing about that that's like it takes on its own kind of life, and it's like you can't even you to a degree. Like I don't have this problem, but you
Yeah.
to a degree probably there's some expectation. The way that like when I tell someone I'm a comic, you probably have the thing where people are like, yeah, well, who led the Mariners in RBIs in 1987? If you're such a big fan, you know.
Yeah, it's weird because I I totally understand people's sentiment on looking down on super fans, and I do it
Sure,
too. You know, it's like when you see the Seahawk guy at a
sure,
Seahawks game who spends all day painting himself green and getting himself, in character just to go to a football game. You're like, man, that's dumb. Then, but at the
yeah,
same time, you start thinking about it more, and you're like, man, if this dude is going through all that just to get whatever kick of dopamine he gets out of it, there's probably something else going on there that's contributing to all this. Like
yeah,
he's unfulfilled in other aspects of his life or whatever it might be. So
sure,
again, this kind of goes back to what I was saying earlier. This is like if for a lot of these people, if this is the one thing that's keeping them going, then just let them have it. Just let them have it.
yeah,
But I do agree that it does take on a life of itself. That's when you see people. You'll see these super fans go online and start asking people for money so that they can get to their favorite sporting event, or they'll really, if it kind of works its way into your life, then fine. But if it
yeah,
becomes your life, then it might be a bit much. At that point,
yeah.
maybe scale it back a little bit because no one's asking for this. No one's asking you to be a super fan. But I think the assumption that these people have over time is that there's a demand for them. They have to keep showing
Sure.
up as this character they've created, or else people will be let down. And I promise you, no one will be let down. No one
It's
will be
also
let down.
it's also funny how like the Seahawks like I'm on because I had a sports blog. I'm friends with a lot of people who are Seahawks uh related, and I it's like there's also among Seahawks fans there's like a handful of super fans, but there's also like the B squad of super fans also. You know what
The
I mean?
JV,
Yeah,
if the varsity can't play, you're in.
yeah, and there's guys that I've seen like turn. There's one guy I'm thinking of in particular who was like kind of a Seahawks super fan and then
Yeah,
became like a Donald Trump super fan, and it's like, oh, you just like really can't have a moderate feeling about anything. Like you just
yeah.
can't be like, yeah, that thing's okay. I don't need to make it my entire identity. You
Yeah,
know?
it's weird because it just feels like that type of fan gets into this mindset where it's like a competition to be the best fan. And
Right.
there's no competition to be the best fan. No one's, I mean, every now and then you'll see some company throw some marketing dollars at this sort of thing and
Sure.
have you rank your super fan, but that's dumb. You know, there's
Mhm.
no real competition to be the best fan. Everyone, you can just you can be the best fan in the world without creating a character out of it. You know, go
I would be
support your team.
remiss to not mention Sonic's guy Chris Brannon, who
Yeah.
actually is a guy who so he passed away a couple years ago.
Mm-hmm.
A guy that I liked a lot at the beginning, and then he kind of had the thing. I never disliked him. I will say I
Yeah.
had a podcast way back when where I was like, "Oh, I know Sonic's guy," and the co-host was like, "We will never have him on. If you decide to have him on, I will never do the podcast. I will quit the podcast." And I was like, "Oh, that's kind of shitty." And a couple
Wow.
times I had to edit out him saying like really horrible things about Chris Brannon.
Yeah.
And not because he cared. He obviously didn't care about me or having those things on the podcast, but I'm like, this is a dude, like I live in Tacoma. I would see Chris all over the place. And the last couple of years of I actually, because he when I met him, I didn't do comedy, and then he started to see me do comedy and like was like, you know, really it was like cool for him to be like, oh man, you're like so good. Like I met you when you didn't do comedy and you're so good. And not that he was like some comic that everyone needed their respect, but he was just like such a fucking nice guy with some demons, of course. But even I remember like his house got broken into, is my memory. That could be slightly
I remember the story about that. Yeah.
yeah, and there was definitely a news story, and there was probably a GoFundMe, but I don't remember that GoFundMe becoming like. There's some folks that are like making fucking careers out of these GoFundMes. It feels like, you know, and not necessarily even just Seattle fans, like all over the country. I'm sure these people exist.
Yeah, I mean it's a tough place to be, man. Like I said, anyone who needs that element of attention on them as just a fan of a sports team probably has a lot going on that's not being resolved. And we're not the we're not the podcast to break down why that is. But
we think you're all piles of shit, every one of you. You fucking should be ashamed of yourselves. Come after it. No,
it is the one thing that is funny, and this like Broccoli guy made me think of this, and it kind of goes for all the super fans out there, is you just have so many people out there who observe super fans doing their thing and strongly take one side or the other.
Yeah,
and
I have been surprised to see the real partisan takes on pro or anti Broccoli guy, because whatever you feel about him, and I know him personally, so I'm like, there's part of me, there's things that I like about him that people don't even know exist, and there's things that I don't like about him, you know, like anybody you actually know. But I would say like what he's doing is so harmless that it's like I don't understand why anyone would have a super strong opinion.
That's exactly it. It's very harmless what he's doing. However, I think we can all admit it's weird. You know, like whether you might love it and you might hate it, but we can agree that dancing with broccoli in public is not something you see from most people, so that makes it unique and weird.
Are you aware? I don't know how much of the potato or broccoli guy canon is out there, but you know he was the guy that would dance with the potatoes at the Idaho Potato Bowl. Did you know that?
Well, yeah, because his story. I remember hearing him tell his story one time, and that's where it all started. He went to the Idaho Potato Bowl. He did this with potatoes, and he got his 15 minutes of fame because they like filmed him on TV. Doing this.
Can I tell one of his jokes that I thought was amazing?
Yes. Yeah.
He was. And I'm going to do an impression of him, and anybody that knows him and has seen his comedy will know that this is a good impression of him, but I have to do it at low volume. My throat can't handle doing an impression of him at full volume.
It's not the only thing your throat can't handle.
It's going to be a great segue to this joke, by the way. He goes, I got my first blowjob at 25 years old. I'm 25 years old. It was like such a simple, incredible joke. He had another one about how it was also,
just really quick, I will say, I don't think most people who are very, very supportive of Broccoli Guy online can fathom him talking about blowjobs.
Sure. This is why I think he scrubbed all his stand-up off the internet, by the way.
Yeah, he's like, I'm going full clean. I'm a clean comic now.
Yeah, I'm all vegetables. He also had a joke where he was like, I guess I did say his name, so, you know, whatever. Jim, if this upsets you, let me know and I'll try to edit around your name. I guess I got to edit it again there. He had another joke where he goes, I thought this one was even better. He had a lot of stuff about like history. That's why would have been great on Drunk History.
Yeah.
But he had a joke where he was like, I was having sex with this girl and I was trying not to finish. And so I just started thinking about like the Nathaniel Greene's battle tactics at whatever like war. And he goes, and then I came anyway because those tactics were so good. And I was like, he used to do daily streams of on a what's that fucking on a Twitch of him playing Oregon Trail. He's a nut, dude, and he was like, you know, a tremendously talented comic that I feel like didn't ever have like a true passion for comedy, is what I guess I would say, based on the fact that he quit multiple times. Yeah. And hopefully this thing is doing it. I know he cares about being a substitute teacher, and that's also good. He's been to my house, had dinner at my house. I was gonna record an album for him at one time, but I don't think that's well, especially if he hears this. I'm not criticizing him, by the way. Like I always say to people like that are critical of comics specifically that get big off stuff like this, you don't get to decide what hits. My buddy Todd Royce has this like gimmick thing he does on TikTok. Mm-hmm. He has a comedy career now because of this gimmick. Would I want to do the gimmick? No. But would I take the career if it meant doing the gimmick? Probably. I mean, it's easy to say when there's no threat of it happening, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, it's a weird space, man. Like if you decide on a whim that you don't want to do comedy anymore and you want to do something complete like teach like this guy, that's got to be a tough transition, because I'm sure if you're a good comedian or you know, even mid-level, you're probably telling some pretty raunchy jokes that a lot of parents out there wouldn't like. And
yeah, I'm surprised at how many comedians are teachers and use their real names. It always surprises me because I know a bunch of comics. I'm not going to name them because I'm not trying to hurt anyone's career, but like who have jokes that are tremendously dark and vulgar, and it's like, oh wow, like you're how brave, genuinely brave to do that. And then there was a woman named Rachel Mack who's a comic. She was in LA at the time, and I talked to her because we had a 6-month-old when the pandemic started. Her and her husband had a kid April 2020 in Los Angeles. Wow. And so they're like 8 months pregnant when the pandemic starts. They show up to the hospital like literally hours after the cutoff where you were not allowed to have anybody in the delivery room with you, and they made an exception, allowed him to be in the delivery. She's telling all these stories, and I was playing clips, and we're talking about stuff because she was a teacher also in like her previous career. Yeah. Well, the pandemic happens, nobody can do comedy, and she starts substitute teaching again because she has to make a living.
Yeah.
Now, all of a sudden, she's got fucking students finding this podcast. It was like the most viewed podcast of mine. I was like, that's great. She's so funny. Well, it turns out the reason was so I like took the podcast down because
the PTA got a hold of it. And
truly. And I'm like, I don't want to fuck somebody's livelihood up over a fucking poorly listened to podcast that made no difference in their career.
I mean, it's almost like one of those things now, like 20 years ago, no one would ever see clips if you were moonlighting as a comic or moonlighting as anything. People really wouldn't be any paper trail of it. But now it's like, man, if you're going to moonlight as something like this, you better be good.
Right.
Because if you're not good, someone's going to find you. It'll never be worth your while. It'll never be worth the hassle of having to go through this and everything that it means to your career and your reputation, all those things. So you have to be good now. And if you're not, then you got to.
That's why I was
start dancing with broccoli, apparently.
I was talking to my neighbor because he's like, you know, this is the thing when you're at my level and you make quote unquote comedy fans. Almost every comedy fan eventually will go, you know, I've thought about trying comedy. And that's fine. Like, I get everybody thinks they can do it. And like at one point, I was a guy who probably said something like that to somebody. My advice to anybody doing comedy is if you're going to do an open mic, do it in a city you don't live in. Like, make the trip to the next major metropolitan area and do that shit in anonymity.
Or come up with a stage name.
Yeah, that's another good option. Yeah. There's a couple great ones out there. There used to be this dude named Pussy Vampire that would do.
Now, is that his given name, or
I think it was Vagina Vampire was his given name, his proper name. Yeah, Pussy's a nickname. Yeah. Anyway, would you like to talk about sports at some point today?
Yeah, we can. What sports topics do we have today?
So this is one that I've been thinking about doing for a while. By the way, Doug Scott, friend of the pod, sent us a thing, and at some point we will do this because I want to look at more of them. He sent us this, and I might have even brought it up on the podcast already. This amazing video of like a Seahawks song from the '80s. I just don't have it ready to pull up right now.
I know what you're talking about, but that would be good for later on for sure.
Yeah. I have fallen in love with Stephen A. Smith.
Now, sexually or
Any way he'll take it, baby. So my introduction to Stephen A. Smith is when he was opposite Skip Bayless in, what was that show called? First Take? Started out as like Cold Pizza, and then it was First Take.
I'm pretty sure it was first. I've lost track of all the names of the yelling shows.
Yes.
They all blend together now, but that sounds right.
So to me, there was like no real distinction to be made between the quality of journalist that Skip Bayless was and the quality of journalist that Stephen A. Smith was. And then I entered this period of my life where my sports consumption is way less than it was. So I've always just been like, these guys are the same. Skip Bayless sucks. Stephen A. Smith sucks. Everybody sucks. And then I saw Stephen A. Smith on the Flagrant podcast, which is Andrew Schultz comedy podcast. It like used to be about sports. Now it's more like a culture and comedy podcast that maybe occasionally deals with sports.
Sure.
And I loved it. I was like, he's so honest on there in ways that he said a thing that gave me some respect for him, where he's like, if I tell you something is just know that whatever I report is like 20% of what I know. So if I like, basically he's saying like, I have access because I'm discreet. So if I report something, I'm not lying. Like this is something I've decided is worth reporting on.
Yeah.
Which I thought was,
that's the reality, dude. I am adjacent enough to the people that have access that I've kind of been like grandfathered into that realm of knowledge, not to the level that they are, but they tell me the stories of things I can't repeat. There's a joke in one of our group chats that before anybody divulges anything of sensitivity, they tell me I cannot post it on Twitter. It's like a running gag at this point. Like, this is not for Twitter, Alex, specifically me. And, but the reality of being a reporter is, you are only reporting a fraction of what you actually know about just the time that you spend in like locker rooms or behind the scenes with the subject you're covering, whatever it might be, gives you so much to observe that other people will never ever know a thing or two about. And of course you always get fan backlash that people will always be upset. Like, hey, this, you have an obligation to tell us as a journalist or whatever your role might be. And it's like, they can't though. They can't. And they have no obligation to tell you anything. I mean, part of being a good journalist is understanding that you can't burn bridges with your sources or your subject material. You need those people to some degree. You're not telling untruths because that would be dishonest, but you're only telling part of the truth. I mean, and that's like any walk of life. I mean, like you could have a day job and you might work with customers, and if something's going terribly, you're not going to tell them everything that's going terribly. You'll tell them what they need to know. I mean, that's just how we operate through life. But I get it, man. A lot of fans really, really hate that element. They feel like it's gatekeeping, and it is to some degree. But
what's interesting is, like, do you remember when Todd McShay was like, Jalen Carter has character concerns?
Yeah.
And people were like, fuck you, you don't know anything. Like, and it's like, obviously he knew something. Like, and maybe he's, first to, but he didn't even say what the things were. And then, anyway, so I want to play. So I've recently, the other thing about seeing Stephen A. Smith in that setting on Flagrant was he wasn't confined by the rules of Disney and
the ESPN realm. Yeah.
So it was the first time I had seen him like really be, because again, I'm not familiar with, I know he's got a storied career as a journalist and a radio host and stuff like that, but it's just like my exposure to him is exclusively ESPN until that point. And it was very eye-opening. And then so I've recently started listening to his podcast. And again, I thought the podcast was an ESPN podcast. And then I started to hear, like, he would talk about stuff where I'm like, hey, dude, he's he talks about sports in a way that's like very fair. It's
Yeah.
bombastic. I would say I'm always hesitant to make there's a Daryl Morey, the GM of the 76ers. I read this book about it was the Undoing Project, and they had a chapter on Daryl Morey. And one of the rules he had in player evaluation was you could have no intra-racial player comparisons. He hated player comparisons.
Yeah.
But he was like, if you're going to do a player comparison, that person has to be of a different race. Because otherwise, a lot of times people are like, well, they kind of look like each other.
Yeah,
Their
they
games
just
may
make
not
lazy,
even.
lazy comparisons. Yeah.
Right, exactly. And so he was, I'm worried about making this comparison as an intra-racial comparison. But it's like Chris Rock talking about sports. Like there's like a handful of different kinds of comics. One of them is like a preacher comic. Sam Kinison was one that I don't really care about. But Chris Rock is a guy in my life that was like, this dude is a preacher on stage. He just happens to be saying comedy, but if he was talking about Jesus, it would be the exact same tone.
I mean, the interesting thing about a guy like Stephen A. Smith or anybody in that kind of television media spectrum, you're basically being asked to give outlandish takes on every possible on boring subjects. Let's just be honest; they're mostly boring subjects. I mean, even what we're doing here. A lot of times we're taking a boring subject and trying to make it interesting, and we're obviously not as good as a Stephen A. Smith, or we wouldn't be sitting in our homes doing this. We would be on TV. But the point is, you're being asked to put forth takes that are going to be very divisive, which means, you know, half of people are going to love you and half of people are going to hate you if you're doing it well. And the reality is that's probably not who you are. And at the same time, you're being asked to do that. You're getting paid a ton of money, which is great, but everything that you possibly say could cost you your job at any moment. So it's like you're constantly just straddling like an electric fence, just trying to like get by. And it takes a lot of skill to be that good at it. I understand why people don't like him, and I understand why people do like him. And it's because he's obviously doing his job well enough to polarize people, which is what he's tasked with doing.
Yeah. So this podcast, he'll occasionally talk about like politics or pop culture or whatever. He had, to me, like the most recent episode, he had an incredibly measured and responsible take on the Jordan Neely situation in New York, which is like, why would you go to Stephen A. Smith for that? I don't know, but it turns out he's one of the only sane people out there that's got like a view that's not incredibly divisive, you know?
Well, and I think one thing that TV journalism in general has been accused of in recent years, especially with news and politics, is just being lazy. You know, they're doing everything for shock value. And you could argue that a guy like Stephen A. Smith is kind of doing that because he's just yelling on TV. You know, he's just yelling and they're playing highlights that he has to formulate an opinion on them. But I think when you compare him against one of his own colleagues, there's Kendrick Perkins, who he works with a lot, who covers the NBA and is a former NBA player. He will get a lot of traction for having outlandish takes as well. But it borders on buffoonery. They're not informed takes. He's just saying things in hopes that the video will get a lot of clicks and there will be eyes on him, which, again, is kind of part of what TV entertainment is all about, just, you know, getting eyes on you. But
he gets to be the heel or the goat in the old term, like the scapegoat, not the GOAT with the abbreviation, but like he gets to be the goat. He gets to be the butt of the joke.
I think we tend to lump all those types of people together, right? We start throwing Kendrick Perkins and Stephen A. Smith and people like Skip Bayless all into the same bucket and saying they're all the same. They're all the same. They're offering lazy takes. They're getting paid a ton of money. I could do that job and I would do it better than them. Everybody always says that. I do that job for free, or I could do it better than them. And it's like, well, you don't understand the obligation that you have to your bosses and to the people watching you and to whatever it is you're covering, you know, whatever your subject is. And I think the difference with a guy like Stephen A. Smith and then a guy like Kendrick Perkins, Stephen A. Smith is actually a guy who came up as a journalist. So he understands the journalistic ethos. He understands what he has to do to do his job well, where a lot of people, you know, former players, when they take former players or, you know, just throw them into these roles, they're saying, you know, say whatever you want. Who cares? And these guys don't have any problem burning bridges. But the thing about burning bridges, man, in an industry like that, when you piss somebody off, you're probably not going to get another chance to make it up to them. So it's very hard to actually do what they're doing. Like I have some level of respect for it. I'm not a fan of Stephen A. Smith necessarily, but I understand how difficult the position is that he's in.
So I do want to watch a clip of Stephen A. in a moment
Sure.
of his podcast. One thing I remember him talking about on the Flagrant podcast was because he was reporting on Allen Iverson in Allen Iverson's prime, and like he has specific examples. If you go back and listen to that, which I should have just pulled up examples of that or like that, but he has specific examples of like, this is what I knew, here's what I reported, and I was like, oh shit, like this is like what it, I think it's just was really illustrative of what it takes to be a sports journalist that people don't realize. But I'm going to play this one.
Okay.
This is him. It starts out, he's talking about, oh man, hold on. God damn, do we need a producer? Or I need a PC to do this. Okay, can you see Stephen A. Smith right now?
I can see his 5 head. Yes, there it is. That hairline is right where I expect it to be.
Yes. Okay, so first off, there was the part that leads up to this is there was a clip of Shaq and Charles Barkley laughing about Anthony Davis leaving the game. And I don't know if it's before this or after this on Stephen A. Smith's podcast, but he talks about how he's like, everyone should be sensitive about the CTE issue, blah, blah, blah. He obviously didn't have a concussion. But anyway.
Yeah. So I can't hear this on my end.
Oh, really?
But it honestly makes it better because if you've ever seen Stephen A. Smith talking as demonstratively as he does while not being,
I wonder
able
if
to
it's
hear,
like if it's
kind of hilarious.
I wonder if it's like somehow copyright protected.
Maybe so. Yeah, you probably can't broadcast it out. Yeah, but
All
maybe
right.
give a quick summary. What's he saying?
So basically, he goes into how. Did you hear the one with you, or
no? But I know that I lived the one with me, so I knew what I was saying.
Oh, hold on. Let's see.
I'm sure it's probably on the podcast. Other people can probably hear it. I just can't hear it through my computer.
Maybe, or maybe it's not. I think it would be. It would be.
The one with me is irrelevant. We don't need to have that. But just give a summary of what Stephen.
Okay, so Stephen A. I think I know what I fucked up, but Stephen A. Basically he goes from talking about this thing to like into woke culture, and I was like, oh, like this is like white dudes should love Stephen A. And maybe that is who loves Stephen A. But I feel like it's not. I feel like white dudes hate Stephen A.
I don't think. Unlike a lot of maybe polarizing figures out there, I don't know that Stephen A. is being divided by race. I think there's just as many people of any ethnicity that
it's going to be a big deal now. We're going to be able to hear it.
Okay.
You win game 5 in Golden State. Ain't no way in hell LeBron James losing game 6 in LA. You got him. Take them. This is your opportunity. Don't give these brothers life. They're sharks in blood-infested waters. They're snipers of the highest degree. From a basketball standpoint, of course. Steph Curry and Klay Thompson are that lethal. I don't give a damn how awful Klay Thompson has looked in games 4 and 5. The brother is one of the top 5 shooters in the history of basketball. Steph Curry is clearly the greatest shooter that God ever created. You don't want to give them life. And you're Anthony Davis, you are their kryptonite because they have no answer for you at all. Period. They didn't have an answer for you in game 1. They didn't have an answer for you in game 3. They didn't have an answer for you in game 4.
Yeah,
you're giving what you got in game 5. You can take them.
All right.
You can take them. But I woke
when he pauses, you just never see the pause.
All right, everybody living on the fringes. It's MAGA on one side, it's the woke culture on the left side, and all of us are victimized, stuck in between, trying to inch ever so closely to common damn sense.
So I don't know if you caught that. He basically equated what's going on in sports to the divide of the woke culture. Divide. And I loved it. I love that because that's like, I feel like, one, it's a conversation that a lot of people are having, and it's like a thing that it always gets back to at some point.
Yeah.
There's also a
trigger. They're trigger topics too. I mean, like, if you take nothing away from that conversation that he was just having about Anthony Davis and the Warriors and all of that, you'll take that soundbite away from it. And there's so many times now where those types of sound bites are what get these video clips traction online, right? Someone will take that and be like, I can't believe he compared two basketball teams to woke culture, or there will be an article about how they can't believe you even use the terminology woke culture, and then someone will take that and start talking about what does woke culture even mean, and then it'll be, why did Stephen A. Smith even feel like he needed to go there? You could spin this off into 1,000 different iterations, right. And that's really, I think that's what they're going for now. It used to be like, it always felt like it used to be these types of shows were just catering to the lowest common denominator, right? Sure. Like they're trying to create the bar conversation that you have with the guy sitting next to you drinking a beer. That's kind of how these shows all originated in the first place. But now it's like, it's so different now. They don't care if you talk about it with somebody else face to face. It used to be like the water cooler conversation. Now they want the viral traction online, and it's little sound bites like that are going to get you that.
He gets to a point later in there where he's like, whatever happened to being a sports fan? Why can't I just be like, you should be in there, dude? And that's actually kind of a thing that I do agree with, which is like, you have to like take these sports things and you have to view them through these lenses of sensitivity.
Yeah.
That I'm like, this guy's a millionaire. He doesn't care about me at all. Like, I mean, I try to be pretty measured in my opinions and like think them through. Yeah. But I also like, there's a thing where it's like, everything is such an extreme now that if somebody has an opinion that's like, if they were like Ja Morant, which we're going to talk about, but like if somebody said something like Ja Morant is a thug, the history of the word thug in American journalism, American sports journalism, is obviously like racially tinged.
It's very bad. Yeah, it's very bad.
Right, but it's like Donald Trump called a fucking, on that CNN town hall thing that he did, he called a black police officer a thug for killing a protester. It's like that one is the most transparent thing I've ever seen him say. Of all the crazy racist, racial things that he said, the dog whistles, the whatever, it's so fucking obvious that if that was a white cop and a BLM protester, he would have a different opinion.
Yeah. And it's the lazy takes. We resort to the most aggressive language when we cannot put into words what needs to be said.
But then when there's a moment where like this Ja Morant shit, for example, like the shit he's doing is like quote unquote thug behavior. It's like hip hop thug. It's like what hip hop artists who are thugs, who are self-proclaimed thugs.
Yeah, you gotta tread carefully.
No, but
I get what you're getting at. But I do think there's a self-proclamation.
But of course, this word. Every time I say this word, I know it's like it's fucking crazy, and it's like the one moment it ever deserves to be said, you can't say it, so we have to fucking dance around it. And by the way, Ja Morant fucked up again. That's where we're at. Is Ja Morant fucked up one more time?
He did. No, but I think the way that you can talk about a narrative like Ja Morant or anybody who does stupid shit,
sure,
who keeps repeatedly doing stupid shit, when you use words that have historically been racially coded, I mean that's where the problem lies.
Yeah.
We should, and I get it, man. Like
Ty Domi was a thug on the ice. You know what I mean? Like these words belong, they have an actual meaning. And because of people like Donald Trump or people like, and you know me, this whole podcast, I spend a lot of time defending like the good faith arguments conservatives have, because I find they're like poorly misrepresented, or they're poorly represented, whatever. By the way, I don't spend that much time doing that, but on occasion I will do that.
Right.
This is a situation where like this one's so fucking obvious, and to me it was like attached to this other situation where this guy, like, this dude's gonna get the longest suspension in sports. Like we were talking about Trevor Bauer. I wouldn't be surprised if we
get the longest suspension.
They're talking full season. That's what my source Stephen A. Smith
what he'll do in his spare time. I mean,
probably not good stuff. It seems like he can't seem to stop. And again, like I'm in the place too where I'm like, what did he do that was illegal? Does he deserve?
Okay. Yeah, I know. I get it. Before we transition to Ja Morant, because we do need to give it its proper due. But I will say, like, the interesting thing about just language and wording in general is that the only time we we make these words taboo is after they've been weaponized by shitty people. You know,
Sure.
and then of course the ones who clamor for that language to be brought back are usually the same people that weaponized it in the first place. Like, you can't, if you're going to weaponize language to try and hurt others, like, when that's taken away from you, you have to adjust.
Yeah, I guess
I'm not trying to give you the playbook on how to continue being an asshole. Not you,
Yeah,
but
yeah,
like
I
people in general. But it's like, if we're going to do that and you are too lazy to figure out a way to be an asshole in a different manner, that's on you, man.
Yeah, I guess
you shouldn't be an asshole.
Obviously my relationship with language relative to comedy is a little different than
It is.
But I think like to me the thing, it's kind of a pipe dream, this idea that changing the language is going to change the like anything positive, like
Yeah.
there's a word I won't use on stage or whatever, that's the R word. We would call it the R word now.
Yeah.
But what the R word used to be, it was the evolution of what used to be offensive words, which were evolutions of what used to be offensive words.
Yeah.
And we eventually eventually the people who want to hurt people's feelings will just start using the new word as a pejorative, right? Like it's not the word that's the problem. It's the people that want to hurt people's feelings.
People who want to do that are always going to find a way to do that.
Yeah.
You know, they're always going to find a way. I think by stripping them down of what they can and can't say, or increasing the consequences of using certain language, it just makes it a little bit harder for them to.
Yeah, but it also seems to create this power on the other side that is
no,
wild.
I totally get that. I totally get that too. And I understand, like, you know, if a comic on stage uses a word that maybe is like a little insensitive, but there's obviously a handful of words no one can really use without incredible backlash, right? But if you're using one of kind of like, let's say, those B level or C level words that are like
the JV, the AAA words.
Yeah, if you say this at work, you're going to HR and you're probably getting in trouble. But in other scenarios, you're probably going to be okay. But if you say those words as a comic or whatever, like, yeah, we all get you're joking. You're not using this in a weaponized manner. It's when somebody says it in a way that you know they don't have good intention behind it. That's where the problems come in. It's like, I don't know. We can transition to John Morant.
Sure. Well, I mean, it's. I don't think it's going to be a complete departure from what we're talking about, because the thing with John Morant is he's facing a suspension. He had. I'll pull it up since we have the video queued, and I somehow. Let's see if I can do this a little more effectively. I should have been doing this while we were talking, but I was.
No, you were impassioned.
I was active listening.
That's...
So John Morant. There's another Instagram live video where he's. I gotta turn the volume up on this somehow.
Okay, this is my favorite song, please.
I guess that probably is actually better that we just talk over. But here he is, that you see it slow down, and he's got a gun in his hand.
Yeah,
and it's like the like. Hold on, I'm gonna pause it on my side. This is one of those examples where you're like, how are you so stupid? How are you so like it's not even like, I understand, like Josh Gordon. Remember Josh Gordon played for the Seahawks barely played for the Seahawks, bounced around the NFL forever. He was a compensation round pick because he basically got dismissed from the Baylor program, I believe, for substance abuse.
Yes.
I think he entered the NFL in the substance abuse program, gets drafted, I believe, by the Browns in the
supplemental draft.
Supplemental
draft. Yeah.
And then he's like, has truly one of the best seasons a receiver has ever had in the history of the NFL. This dude is ready to become like one of the highest paid receivers in football, if not the highest paid receiver in football, after and he just can't keep it together for long enough. And it would be shit like he drank a Corona on a plane, and it's like, just don't fucking drink a Corona on that plane. What are you doing?
Yeah, I think with Josh Gordon, the system was really stacked against him because
what I was going to say is, I understand the addiction thing. That's a physical addiction.
Yeah.
Dancing with guns is not something I know to be a physical addiction. You know
At this point, you have to ask yourself, is John Morant addicted to dancing with guns? Because we've seen him do it a couple times and he can't seem to stop. So maybe he has an addiction too.
What if we gave Ja Morant broccoli to dance with.
I think that's the solution.
That's the solution.
We gotta get these two hooked up, man.
Yes to broccoli, no to guns. In your
broccoli guy to meet up with Ja Morant and just replace the gun with some broccoli, and everybody wins. Broccoli guy's his message gets spread far and wide. Yeah, no, Ja Morant, man. He I think the first time this happened, it's kind of like, okay, he's young, he's 21 or 22 or whatever he is. And when you're that age, you're an idiot. You know, you do stupid things and you don't necessarily even learn from them, which is how it happens a second time.
Right.
But it is becoming a problem because you can't just go around flashing guns all over the place. That's actually illegal, you know, like, so.
Well, I don't even know though, like did what he did. I don't know if it breaks the law.
The first time, I don't think it does because he's inside the strip club. Well, it might. It depends how the strip club views it. This second time, he's in a car in broad daylight in the middle of the day. So, I mean, theoretically, that's out in public at that point, right? Because people can see that.
I think Tennessee. Well, I don't know where the video actually took place, but I think Tennessee has like permitless carry. I don't think it's like. I mean, it's like it breaks some rules the NBA has, but I suspect it doesn't actually break a law. That's my guess.
I mean, the NBA is I think all sports leagues to some degree are probably very sensitive to the gun issue in our country. But even if you don't like the NBA, really good example with the NBA, when the Washington Bullets existed, they made them change their name to the now Washington Wizards because they didn't want the gun connotation associated with that team. And that was shortly after like the first big shooting, you know, the first big mass shooting. That was after right around the time of Columbine, I believe. And all it took was one shooting for them to be like, we're not calling you the Bullets anymore. Now
there were decades of inner city violence, but once, I mean, that's probably like a criticism, but like decades of inner city violence. And then they're like, but wait,
once the gun crisis came to the forefront, it became something the NBA didn't want associated with them. And so obviously they're probably more sensitive to gun issues than maybe other leagues are because of their history.
Hold on. I gotta fact check you a little bit because I just made they announced the change in 95 and I think Columbine was 99.
Yeah, Columbine was after that. Okay. So my history here, it predates that.
Classic misinformation, Alex. My God.
I'm the new Stephen A. Smith. The fact of the matter is they just didn't want to be, the NBA didn't want to be associated with guns in that fashion. They had a team change their name about it. So certainly they don't want one of their best players, their most recognizable players out there flashing guns all over the place. That's not ideal. I can't imagine it's a PR nightmare for anybody. I mean, forget about the violent implications of it. If he used to do that and it goes off and, you know, he kills himself or hurts others, like that's obviously very bad. But just from a standpoint of public relations, it's terrible. It's terrible.
I think it's a weird one to me still though, because it's like, I understand the arguments you're making are for gun control, not for Ja Morant behaving differently. And I'm not like against those arguments, but to me, it's like this dude he only should have to adhere to the laws of where he lives as opposed to like, to some degree. I don't know if that's even what I am arguing. I just don't know that I think that it's almost like I don't think the NBA has jurisdiction over this until he actually does something that is actionably illegal. But it's possible. I do think there was some investigation into the Colorado thing that maybe there was something illegal and he didn't end up getting charged with it. But
again, it's I mean, the way that they handled this the first time was so weird. They basically sent him to this kind of ambiguous rehab.
Sure.
For which nobody knows it almost made a mockery of what rehab is, right? Like, what are you sending him to? Gun rehab? Like, how does this even work?
Well, now that we know that he's addicted to dancing with guns, I think we know the rehab for him.
Yeah, exactly. They sent him to this place in Miami.
If there was a place that had Gundancing Rehab, I do think Florida would be the place.
Gundancing. I would think they'd probably want to go in the other direction.
Okay, so I've been trying to keep the titles of this podcast to 2 words. Gundancing Rehab. Can we make gun dancing 1 word? Are you accepting gun dancing as a...
Just do a hyphen. Then it's 1 word.
There we go. Good.
Yeah. Perfect.
It's like unfortunate. I do think that it's like it's going to be a situation where a huge segment of the population thinks it's a ridiculous suspension, and I think it's going to be because like Trevor Bauer is such an easy target. He's such an asshole. He's such like an easy guy to hate that he had no goodwill built up with people. So when he gets this long suspension, it's that like he's a piece of shit, so fuck him anyway thing. Like that people
he deserved it kind of thing. Yeah.
Right. If it wasn't for this, it should be it should have been earlier. They should have figured out a way to suspend him earlier.
Yeah.
With John Morant, it's gonna be just culturally different. And if it's a year suspension, which it seems crazy to me.
Yeah, I get it. I understand. I mean, there are the types of people out there that think athletes should never get in trouble unless they broke some law, unless the legal system is involved in some way. They committed a crime. But we know that's not how the world works.
Or if they committed even harm against someone else, that's not a crime.
But that's not how the world works. I mean, people lose their jobs every day and they don't commit crimes or do anything illegal. They just are assholes or they do something stupid or they fuck something up. That happens all the time with any job. And it's at
yeah, that's a fair point.
It's at will. It's at will employment. That's kind of the system that we put in place.
Except for he's on a guaranteed contract. That's another thing I've heard, by the way. I think from Stephen A. Smith also, that one of the things they're threatening is to take the guarantee out of his contract somehow. I don't know what the stipulations required for that are.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, usually when you hear those types of things pop up, it's because of like drug issues or substance abuse that has created this lack of availability, right? Because when you have those issues, a lot of times you can't be available to do your job. You can't go out and play if you're an athlete. But with John Morant, the availability is still there. He's just every time he steps off a court, he does something stupid. And not only does he do something stupid, but he keeps going on Instagram Live. Maybe if I'm the Grizzlies, I maybe just intervene and just look, you got to delete your Instagram account, dude. You're going to have to find different ways to slide into women's DMs. It's not going to be on Instagram because every time you get on Instagram, you film yourself doing something stupid.
I don't know if it was his Instagram or not even. That's the other thing. Is like it might have been his buddy's Instagram. I know we could go back to the video, but I'm not thrilled about going back through this video process again.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's unfortunate. I also think I don't know of anyone who has like severely, I mean, he was considered like maybe the best player in basketball now to like a guy who might miss a year. I mean, maybe the only even comparison I could think of, which would be significantly more severe, would be if Michael Jordan was in fact suspended for the time that he was quote unquote retired for the first time. And
the conspiracy theory that he was suspended for gambling, but they wanted to give him an out. So
I actually there's a good podcast about it that I think makes a compelling case. I know everyone involved will say that that's not the case. Everyone in the Chicago media also, but again, we've talked earlier this episode about how much people know and how much access people need. Yeah. And a lot of those guys that are commenting on it are still active journalists and want to continue to have access to the NBA locker rooms and to the Chicago Bulls. So, yeah, I mean, I just can't think of, if it becomes this, a guy that's like basically committed no crime, has harmed nobody yet. He's certainly exhibiting behavior that is worrisome, but he like hasn't actually done anything to anyone yet. To lose a year of his career, to me, seems just like unheard of. But maybe it'll happen. I don't know.
Well, and I mean, this again to the point we've been making this entire show. Like, there's probably more behind the scenes we don't know about his situation. There might be more that the NBA knows. I'm sure there's a lot more that the Memphis Grizzlies know about what's going on with Ja, and it might be more than what we're seeing. I mean, what we're seeing in these little clips is I guess in some ways harmless because no one's being harmed, but it's stupid, and it certainly presents the risk of harm.
Sure.
And that's not good. Even if you don't care about other people, if you don't care if he fires this gun off into a crowd or whatever.
Well, I do care about that, but he didn't do that.
I'm not saying you. I'm just saying there are people out there, I'm sure, who don't care. They're like, he has a right to do that, and if he fires a bullet off and it goes off somewhere, whatever, man. But like, okay, then put it in the terms of he might cause self-inflicted harm, and then that's bad too. There's the risk of harm is there, and we don't know what's going on, but good luck in your second stint of Miami gun rehab, I guess.
Gundancing
Guess you're going back, man.
Okay. So we got to play our home run game. We had another topic on the list, but
I got a good one for you today. Do you want me to go first, or are you ready?
Sure, you can go first. And I keep promising that I'm going to have like a running tally, and I have a spreadsheet that I did It was completely updated at one point, and then I've gone like episodes without doing it. So,
So okay.
yeah,
We'll have a
you can go
big,
first because I have a good one for you that's gonna feel like an easy one, but we'll see.
maybe it's the same guy. But
Maybe
if it is, then we'll have I don't even know, we'll have some divine intervention in play because my wife
I don't
woke
think
up,
there's any way it's the same guy. My guy's
okay.
too easy, perhaps.
My wife woke up this morning and just immediately starts spouting facts about this person to me and is like, "You should use this for your home run game." And I'm like, "We literally just woke up. Like, how did this happen?"
She's
But
this, she's like the de facto producer of the show.
kind of, yeah. Our most active listener. Anyway,
Yes.
this guy is a former Mariner briefly. He had a pretty decent career, better than a lot of people would think. He played 10 years in Major League Baseball. He's a two-time All-Star. So surprisingly, his career WAR, I just noticed this, and I'll share this with you, even though it could lead you down the path. But his career WAR is only 9.5, which I was surprised to find out.
Interesting.
But I think he was a terrible defender, so that probably played a role. It's this guy's Mark Trumbo, if you remember Mark Trumbo.
Yes, Mark Trumbo was. I was actually thinking of. I was trying to think of. I think that's who I thought Billy Butler was. Because
Yeah,
I think
that's
Mark
right.
Trumbo and Billy Butler might be like fraternal twins.
Yeah. Well, I think Trumbo has managed to avoid more buffets. He was a slighter man, but still 6'4", 225. That's what he was listed at. He's a big guy. He was known as a power hitter, but when he was in Seattle, he wasn't that great. So didn't work out too well here, but it worked out other places. He
Sure.
played for the Angels for a few years, for the Diamondbacks, for us, and then for the Orioles is where he finished his career. So 10 years in the league as a first baseman, outfielder, DH type. Even played some third base.
That's got to be
Not
some rough innings.
Yeah, I don't think they were great, but he definitely played there. So yeah, let's hear it.
So wait, how many years did he play?
10 years.
10 years. It
From
seems like his
20.
career was longer than that.
Yeah, it's a pretty short career, all things considered, for being like as good of a player as he was. But 2010 to 2019, I guess 2019 is still recent enough that if this guy really got his shit together, he
Yeah.
could make a comeback. But
He could go play for the Long Island Ducks or the Sugarland
Yeah.
Skeeters or something
he's
like
he's
that.
only 37 years old right now, so yeah, it doesn't. I don't know, probably
So
a little too old.
I remember him coming up as like a bat only, no walks, just power hitter. Probably like my suspicion is high average, but no walks, like very low on base percentage considering the level of contact and the power that he had. My memory too, and you could choose to confirm this or not, is that there was a period. So he was like decent prospect with the Angels. I have no memory of what he did in Arizona, but my memory is that when he went to Baltimore, there was a stretch where it was like the Mariners fucked up. Like this guy's actually good.
In true former Mariner fashion.
Yeah, he had like a good stretch in Baltimore, whether it lasted or not. So I'm using the Alex method. I'm going to say first season, last season, maybe the last 2 seasons are like partial plate appearance seasons. I'd say in a full season, 600 plate appearances, I bet he averages around 30 home runs. So I'm going to go 205 home runs.
Wow, that was very close. 218.
Okay, I almost said 210, and I was like, let's go the under on the 30
Yeah,
per.
that was one. I would say that's got to be one of your best efforts ever.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes, I
that
feel good
is,
about that. Can you tell me what he did in Baltimore after leaving Seattle? Because I feel like
so
he had a huge year.
The season after he leaves Seattle, he plays one season in Seattle, 2015, a partial season. I think he was injured a little bit that year, so he only played 96 games with the Mariners. Prior to that, before we get to Baltimore, in Arizona, he'd hit the ball pretty well. And he'd had a few seasons with the Angels that were really good too. With the Angels, his second season, or his first season is just 8 games. His second season, he comes up, he's a full-time player the entire time, 29 home runs. Next season, 32 home runs, then 34. Then he gets over to the NL, and he's still hitting the ball okay in Arizona. He, as a Mariner in 2015, only 13 home runs. So things seem to fall apart.
How many plate appearances though?
With the Mariners, I guess that was a partial season because he spent time with the Diamondbacks that year too. So I guess total home runs he had that year was 22, and total plate appearances he had in 2015 was 545. So it wasn't a
Okay.
partial season. Sorry, I didn't see that it was split.
How many with the
between
Mariners,
two.
though? How many plate appearances with the Mariners?
With the Mariners, he had 330 or 361 plate appearances and only 13 home runs.
So that's like a 25, 30 home run pace, just about.
Yeah, a little less than what he'd been doing, but there was, his average here wasn't bad. He was a 263 hitter as a Mariner, 735 OPS. Like those were, I think the expectations were maybe a little too high for him.
Sure,
People just kind of, people just kind of didn't
leaving like the second best hitter's ballpark in baseball to come to the maybe were the fences moved in by then?
I think so. I think that was right around the time they were moved in. I want to say the fences were moved in like 2013 or 14, and he was here in 15.
Sure.
But the season after, 2016, he goes to Baltimore, another great hitter's park, and he leads the league in home runs.
That's right.
47 home runs. He's an all-star that year. He played the two corner outfield spots, first base and DH, but 47 home runs. His OPS that season was 850. His batting average was kind of always hovering around 250, and that year it was 256. So you were right. He never really walked much, so his on-base percentage was never like great, but he could hit the ball, man. He could really hit the ball far at times.
Yeah.
And he only played 1,097 career games, and he had 218 home runs. It's pretty good.
Yeah, that's not bad. I'm going to pull up a picture of Mark Trumbo to see if I remember him as goofy looking as I... Yeah, he was just so big and so white. Just like...
He kind of... There's a thing with athletes that I say that they suffer from sometimes, where they suffer from fat face.
Yeah.
And when you have fat face as an athlete, it like in your mind, when you think about them, you think, oh, that guy was big. He was like kind of a big, bulkier guy. And Trumbo kind of had a little bit of fat face, but he was kind of a skinnier dude. He was just kind of a tall, skinny guy. He could hit with power, though.
He also, he looks like a guy that should have a beard. And I think never once in his career maybe had a beard. No,
he's he looks like BYU honor code guy.
Yes,
way too clean cut, way too white. Yeah,
too hairless for me. If I'm not jumping into bed next to that guy, I know that much.
All right, that's a good guess, man. Only off by 13. That's
what was your dear wife? Why was she thinking about Mark Trumbo in her sleep?
I don't know. Maybe
is it because you share a facial shape? Is that
if that's what gets her going? Then I have issues. I have some problems here.
Okay, so mine is going to be a deep classic, not a deep cut. It's one that everybody knows was a good player.
Okay,
a guy who the risk of a player of this profile is that you and I have probably spent a lot of times looking at historical records in baseball. And so it's possible that this is going to be just too easy of a guess, even though this man will have obviously hit a decent amount of home runs in his career. It's as far back as you can go. Some might call him the Mark Trumbo of the 1920s.
Oh, Jesus.
Not George Herman Ruth, but his teammate, inventor of Lou Gehrig's disease, Lou Gehrig.
The first person plagued by a disease named after him. Very convenient.
Pretty brutal luck on that.
Yeah, couldn't have seen that one coming.
So played 17 seasons, all with the Yankees. He, I just to note, and I think it's pretty obvious to everyone who knows his story. Certainly, you're going to be one of these people. I'm going to give you one season, some actual specific stats. 1939, which is actually amazing to imagine that. I always think of this thing. This dude retired before Nazis were taking over. It's weird to me that things occur because that's such a cultural landmark for us. My home was built before Nazis existed. Yeah. This dude was retired before World War II. Yeah. I told you about the Montana club that I went to in Helena that was has these swastikas, and obviously you wouldn't put those there. I mean, maybe Montana would, but that had they predate Nazism.
Yeah. Before it was used against everybody. Yeah.
Right. Back when it was still cool and wasn't used against everyone. So Lou Gehrig, in his final season, 1939, played only 8 games, after, and I'll tell you what his 1938 season was like when we're done. 33 plate appearances, 28 at bats, 4 hits, only struck out once. He had no extra base hits in his final season, but it's striking to me because I guess like the dude ends his career at like he's still playing the previous season at a very high level, ends his career in 1939 after only 8 games. Obviously, we know what we know now. And that's kind of the thing that makes it amazing is this is like a disease that's named after him. It's so like rare at the time.
Yeah.
And still like they had the whatever foresight to be like, this dude is never going to be healthy again. I don't know what the actual, I should actually pay attention to sports history a little more, but you know, like to end his career there after like at some point he was ramping up for the 1939 season and then goes, it's over.
Yeah.
It's like pretty remarkable.
Yeah. No, it's, I mean, what happened is to go from basically being totally healthy to having this debilitating disease and having to just cut it short like that is everybody knows the story. How long did you say he played? How many total
17
years?
seasons. And I am going to pull up real
seasons.
quick just for the sake of it. I want to see what his 1938 splits were if I can find them to see. Maybe he fell apart the second half of that season.
Yeah.
But it just seems to me like the athlete's ego. I mean, he's like playing at a high level September, October of 1938. It's like for the athlete's ego to allow him to retire after 8 games. It's like impressive to me.
I wasn't expecting somebody from the 20s or 30s today.
Come on.
Even if it is someone as big as Lou Gehrig. I legitimately don't know. I know he's in the Hall of Fame. I legitimately don't know if he's one of those guys that was over 500, probably, I would think. But knowing that things were cut short, it's kind of hard to gauge. And even though
I'll give you this. I'll give you one other thing is it was cut short when he was 36 years old. Yeah,
so he was getting towards the end of his career, regardless, I'm sure. 17 seasons and famously, I'm sure early on wasn't a full-time player because he took the starting job from Wally Pipp. And that's how we have the term Wally Pipp. He took the first base job from him.
He was the Iron Man that Cal Ripken took the record from, a record that
he played all the games.
Broken.
I mean, I know what Ruth's home run number was. I know it's over 700, and I assume Gehrig was hitting a ton as well over the course of 17 seasons. I don't know what was considered like normal back then.
Right.
So I'm going to guess like, okay, if he was hitting, let's say 30 a year on average, and he played 17 seasons, that's, I mean, if he had played 20 seasons, 30 a year, that's 600 home runs. So he's probably either just under or just over. I'm going to say 490.
I mean, Alex, I can't even begin to describe. So first off, it's always harder when a guy has a lot of home runs, right?
It was bad. I'm way off.
Let me go through the whole fucking diatribe. Don't you cut me off. It's always harder when a guy has a lot of home runs because there's just more room to miss on, right? And we're doing essentially like a straight volume of home runs difference.
Yeah.
Also, a guy that played forever ago, neither of us ever saw him play, obviously. The home run ball is different at the time.
Yeah.
Babe Ruth was hitting more home runs than some teams. You have this guy who, when we've been going through this game, a lot of times we're like factoring in partial seasons, but what we know about Lou Gehrig is he played every game for like 15 straight years, so we know that he doesn't have this many partial seasons at the beginning, many partial seasons at the end affliction. Was, I think, the second best power hitter of his time, behind obviously Babe Ruth.
Sure.
You said 490 home runs?
Yeah.
493 home runs. The
shit.
fucking the method is ridiculous. You were fucking sunken. You thought you had fucked
Dude,
up. It's
I thought
maybe the closest anyone has ever gotten is that
that's a
one.
big number. Yeah, no, I thought the way that you reacted, I was like, oh, he must be in like the 600s.
Well, but the
But,
thing about that too is like that was back when 300 meant something. So if he had,
yeah,
I wanted to check this. I hadn't checked. I bet you that he retired with the second most home runs ever at that time.
probably because I mean Ruth, like I think his number is like 714 or
Yeah,
something. I think that's the
714.
exact number, right? So I was basing it off what I know about Ruth,
Yeah,
which obviously there's still a huge gap between what Garrick did and
yeah,
what Ruth did. But yeah, I mean, we don't really know that many players from that era. It just seemed like he was probably roughly a 30 home run ish guy, and
yeah.
and usually if you're a Hall of Fame, a sure thing Hall of Famer, you're right around that 500 mark.
Sure.
So
But
I
back
had
then,
figured,
like you could be a 300 guy and you were considered like an iconic power hitter. Like,
oh, absolutely, yeah. I think the fact that Garrick remains held in such high esteem means he has to be around. He has to be around that mark still,
yeah.
and he was. So I didn't expect to be off by 3, but I'm glad. I'm glad I remain in contention in this game after your guess, only
Well,
being off by
by the
13.
way,
This was a good day for both of us.
You say remain in contention. I think we can go back. I think you've beat me every fucking week. I'm just slow. I'm like I'm
No,
narrowing the gap, but like even this one, I'm like
Yeah.
I have a chance to really make back some home runs, and you fucking
This is
you
like being
throw a
yeah.
dart.
It's like being on the golf course on a par 3, and you had a ball that is like within 5 feet of the cup, and I thought that was going to be the KP, and
Yeah.
almost stuck it.
Yeah, not
Almost.
only did you almost stick it, but I fucking 3-putted. By the way, we don't need to talk about my golf game, but I had 2 consecutive holes where I put a ball like a par 3, 4 feet, 2-putted for no, I think I might have 3-putted for a bogey. It was
Yeah.
fucking and then the next hole I hit a ball 295 yards, my best drive of the day. It was 1 foot out of bounds. So goddamn frustrating. Okay,
That's
well,
golf.
let me grab some water and we'll do an intro, okay?
All right, sounds good.